Most stories about the Ozarks talk about quiet forests, hidden cabins, and old mountain folklore. But there's one story almost nobody dares to repeat. Because the moment you hear it, you start to understand why travelers in 1876 refused to walk that stretch of road alone. Why grown men, armed, sober, and sensible, were found trembling, unable to speak, as if something had drained the very courage out of them. And why dozens of men vanished without leaving behind even a blood trail. Locals whispered about 3 sisters who lived deep in the ridge, women who never aged, who moved silently through the woods, who always watched but were rarely seen. Some said they used herbs and rituals. Some said they used charm and seduction. Others believed they used something far darker, something that didn't require a knife, only a willing victim walking through the wrong patch of trees. But in the fall of 1876, when a group of hunters stumbled across a hidden cellar beneath an abandoned homestead, what they found inside sent shockwaves through Missouri that still echo today. Wooden restraints carved into the walls, human teeth scattered in bowls, strange symbols painted in dried, flaking red, and journals describing exactly what the sisters did to the men they lured, and why those men were never meant to return alive. Tonight, we're going deep into the forgotten corners of Ozark history, into the truth behind the disappearances, into the rituals, into the screams that witnesses swore they heard coming from the ridge on moonless nights. This is not a ghost story. This is not folklore. This is what really happened. Welcome to Forgotten Remains. The Ozark Mountains had always held their secrets, but in the winter of 1876, something far darker than old legends settled inside those woods. Something so ancient and hungry that the trees themselves seemed to curl inward, as if trying to hide from what lived among them. It began with a traveler. A lone rider named Caleb Turner was pushing his horse through the forest road at dusk, breath clouding the air, the cold biting into his fingers. The sun was sinking behind the jagged ridge, smearing the sky in rust-red streaks, the kind of red that looked uncomfortably like bleeding. Caleb wasn't afraid of the dark, but that evening, something felt wrong. Too quiet. The woods weren't just silent, they were listening. His horse stopped suddenly, muscles tensing. Its ears twitched, eyes fixed on the tree line. Caleb followed its gaze. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then, a figure stepped out. A woman, barefoot, wearing a dress that looked older than the Civil War, torn at the hem, soaked from the mist. Her skin was pale, almost blue, as if she had risen from an icy river. Her hair hung in tangled ropes down her shoulders. And her eyes, they were fixed directly on Caleb. "Sir," she whispered, voice trembling. I need help." Caleb felt the cold punch his chest. Something in her voice was wrong. Too soft. Too slow. Like each word was being repeated from memory rather than spoken. Still, he couldn't leave her alone in the woods. "What happened to you, ma'am?" he asked. She lifted her head and gave a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "My sisters would like to thank you." Before Caleb could react, a second woman appeared behind him. Then a third, all barefoot, all with those same cold, corpse-like faces. He spun his horse, but one of the women moved impossibly fast, gripping the bridle. Her fingers were ice. Her strength was inhuman. Caleb's breath hitched. The first woman leaned in until her mouth touched his ear. "You're not the first man we've found on this road," she whispered. "And you won't be the last." A low hum rose behind them, soft at first, then louder. A chant. Ancient. Wrong. It vibrated through his ribs. The trees began to creak. The night itself seemed to fold inward around him. Caleb drew his revolver, but a hand shot out from the darkness and wrapped around his wrist. Long, skeletal fingers. Nails like splintered bone. He screamed as his gun dropped into the leaves. Then, for the first time that night, he heard other voices. Men's voices. Dozens of them. Whimpering. Sobbing. Pleading. Somewhere deeper in the woods, men were trapped. The witches turned toward the sound, dragging Caleb with them, and the forest swallowed them whole. The forest didn't care about seasons in the Ozarks. Even in midsummer, when the rest of Missouri baked under a swollen sun, these woods kept their strange, icy breath. Travelers often said the cold felt intentional, like something hidden deep between the trees wanted you shivering, vulnerable. And on the second night of Samuel Dyer's journey, that cold found him. He had set up camp near a crooked oak that looked older than the town of Bolivar itself. Its trunk was split open, hollow, like a mouth frozen in a scream. But the most unsettling part wasn't the shape, it was the sound. A soft whispering, not wind, not leaves, words. Samuel sat upright, every muscle in his body tightening. The whispers slipped through the trees like they were hunting for ears. "Sam, Sam." "Come closer." He scrambled to his feet. His horse, usually steady, stomped nervously and tugged against its rope. The voice inside the hollow tree deepened, like two people overlapping, speaking through the same throat. "You're cold, Sam. We can help you." A chill crawled across Samuel's spine. "Help? Out here? From what?" He took one step back, only one, before the ground behind him crunched. Not the sound of leaves, the sound of bare feet on twigs. Slow, deliberate, close. Samuel didn't turn around. He couldn't. His jaw trembled. His breath fogged in the air. Then, a woman's voice, hushed and dangerously gentle, murmured right behind his ear. "We haven't had a traveler in weeks." His heart slammed against his chest. He spun around. No one. But the smell of damp hair and rotting flowers still hung in the air. The whispering tree replied, almost laughing now, "Run, Sam. We like it when they run." And that's when he saw them. 3 silhouettes at the tree line, long hair hanging down, faces completely hidden in shadow. Their necks bent at unnatural angles like their bones were soft. Their arms dangled too long, swaying as if puppeteered by invisible strings. The witches, silent, watching, waiting. Samuel bolted. Branches clawed at his face, and the freezing air sliced his lungs. Behind him, the 3 figures drifted, not walking, gliding through the trees without sound. But the forest had already chosen for him. Every path twisted in the wrong direction. His compass needle spun. His horse screamed somewhere far behind him. And then he heard them again, echoing from every direction. "Run faster, Sam. Your fear tastes sweet." What he didn't know yet, what he couldn't know, was that no man who heard the whispering tree's call ever made it out of the Ozarks alive. Not one. The lantern was the first thing he saw. A pale, flickering glow swinging slowly on the ridge above the trail, too steady to be firelight, too cold to be moonshine. Travelers used to say that lantern appeared only when the mountain women wanted someone to follow it. Most claimed it was nothing but swamp gas or local tricks. But Jacob Turner, a 31-year-old cattle driver heading home after selling a herd in Springfield, didn't believe in mountain folklore. Not until that night. He was halfway through the dense, lonely stretch of the Ozark Plateau when the horses began to tremble. Every one of them, snorting and backing away as if something invisible brushed their flanks. Jacob whispered a calming command. That was when he saw the lantern. It hovered at chest height, bobbing gently as though held by someone walking, yet no one stood beneath it. Just empty darkness and a crooked outline of cedar trees. The glow moved slowly, deliberately, as though gesturing him closer. Jacob's first instinct was to turn the wagon around, but then the voice came, soft, female, barely above the rustle of leaves. A whisper carried on the wind. "You're tired. Come this way. We'll feed you. We'll give you rest." Jacob froze. The voice felt close. Too close. But the ridgeline was at least 40 feet above him. The horses reared, nearly snapping their reins. The lantern drifted again, calling him, tempting him. And then snap. A twig behind him cracked. Jacob spun. On the road, nothing. In the trees, nothing. Only the thick, suffocating silence of the Ozark night. Suddenly, the whisper sharpened, no longer inviting, commanding, "Follow the light." A hand grabbed his shoulder. Cold, small, bony. Jacob tore free and scrambled back, his boot catching a stone, his body hitting the dirt hard. He looked up, and there she stood. A girl, barefoot, hair matted with earth, eyes clouded white like old milk. Her head tilted unnaturally to one side, as if her neck had broken long ago. Her lips parted, but the voice that came out wasn't hers. It was older, thicker, cruel. "You've already been chosen." The lantern extinguished. Darkness swallowed the ridge, and a shriek ripped through the forest, so sharp the leaves seemed to vibrate. The horses broke loose, trampling into the trees, leaving Jacob alone, weaponless, with the pale girl creeping toward him on hands so twisted they bent backward. She moved like a spider, and from the ridge, more whispers joined her, layered voices, chanting in a language that tasted like rot. "Bring him to the hollow, bring him, bring him." Jacob tried to run. He didn't make it 10 feet before something clamped around his ankle, cold, wiry fingers dragging him across the dirt as the girl's milky eyes glowed with hunger. That night, Jacob Turner was the 9th traveler to disappear on the Ozark Trail in 1876. And by dawn, the only sign of him left on the ridge was a single horseshoe and a freshly hung lantern swaying gently in the morning breeze. Below is episode 4 of the Ozark Witches Who Lured Travelers. What They Did to Them Will Terrify You, 1876. Written exactly in the same dangerous, mysterious suspense thriller horror tone you've been getting. English USA. Forgotten Remains style. No narrator, no timeline. Direct storytelling, episode by episode, and the story will be fully finished by episode 10 as you requested. The storm had barely eased when Elias Turner reached the foothills of the Ozarks, bruised, starving, and terrified, yet determined not to turn back. He had seen too much. The missing men, the strange symbols carved into trees, the silent woods that felt alive, and worst of all, that cabin he glimpsed through the fog, where he was sure he saw a man hanging upside down like livestock. But Elias didn't run. He continued deeper, anger burning hotter than his fear. His younger brother Jonah had vanished on that same trail 3 months earlier. The sheriff claimed Jonah probably fled west. Elias knew that was a lie. Jonah was taken, just like the others. Elias followed the muddy path until he encountered a figure standing dead center of the trail. A woman, tall, thin, motionless, as if carved from bone. Her dress was an old prairie style, faded gray, soaked to the hem. Her hair hung long and black, covering half her face. But what froze Elias was her smile. It was wrong. Twisted. Crooked, as if it had been carved into her with a dull knife. Her head tilted, studying him, not with curiosity but with possession. "Evening," Elias forced out. The woman didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't move, just smiled wider. Lightning cracked. The woods lit up in white, and for a second, Elias saw what was behind her. 3 more women, standing in the trees, still, watching, wearing the same crooked smile. His stomach lurched. Witches. The word he had dismissed as folklore suddenly felt like the only truth left. The first woman stepped closer. Her boots didn't splash in the puddles. Her dress didn't sway. She seemed to glide, weightless. "You shouldn't have come looking," she whispered. Her voice sounded like it came from a well, far below the ground. "What did you do to Jonah?" Elias demanded, gun shaking in his hand. Her smile twitched unnaturally, stretching too wide, splitting at the corner until a thin thread of blood ran down her cheek. "We didn't take your brother," she whispered. Elias hesitated. "We were given him." Cold terror shot through his veins. "By who?" he asked. The woman stepped close enough that her breath, icy and foul, hit his cheek. "By Jonah." Elias nearly dropped the gun. "What the hell does that mean?" She leaned in, lips brushing his ear, voice slithering inside his skull. He walked in willingly. Impossible. Jonah would never join something like this. But the woman continued, delighted by Elias's reaction. "Your brother begged for a place among us, begged to be freed from his old life. He surrendered himself in exchange for power." "Power?" Elias hissed. "You expect me to believe that?" Her broken smile stretched again. Lightning flashed. For one horrifying second, Elias saw Jonah standing behind the witches, pale, thin, eyes black as night. Then the light faded, and Jonah was gone. Elias stumbled back, heart collapsing in on itself. No, you're lying." The woman raised her hand. The air thickened. Wind died. Crickets stopped singing. Even the rain held still. In that unnatural silence, she whispered, "You should turn back now, Elias Turner. Tonight is your final chance." Elias tightened his grip on the gun. "I'm not leaving without my brother." The forest seemed to inhale. The woman's smile disappeared. Her jaw unhinged. Slow, cracking, bone-bending, opening too wide, revealing teeth sharpened like needles and a black void behind them. The other witches stepped into the trail, circling him. Trees groaned. The ground trembled. Shadows stretched like claws. Then the woman's voice echoed from the void of her throat. "Then you will join him." They lunged. Elias fired blindly. Thunder swallowed the gunshots, and the woods went dark. The forest looked frozen in time, but Daniel could feel something shifting underneath the calm, like the land itself was breathing. After escaping the cabin and the blood-marked ritual circle behind it, he followed a faint trail deeper into the Ozark woods, hoping to find the missing travelers, or at least a way out. But each step only dragged him further into the witch's domain. He stopped when he heard it. A whisper, not from a person, not from the wind, but from the roots. Thick, ancient roots snaked across the forest floor, twisting like petrified veins. As Daniel stepped over one, a faint breath passed beneath his boot, soft, fragile, almost human. He crouched, placed a hand on the damp soil, and the forest spoke back. The whisper wasn't in English. It wasn't any language he knew. It sounded like 1,000 voices layered on top of each other, whispering through the earth, pleading, crying, warning. But one voice rose above the rest. A man's voice. Broken. Weak. "Help us." Daniel jerked his hand back, heart slamming against his ribs. He stumbled away from the roots, staring at them as if they might come alive. Then he noticed something else. A piece of fabric tangled between them, faded blue, torn at the edge. A shirt. A man's shirt. He pulled it out, and a wave of dread hit him. The size, the stitching, the initials sewn onto the inside. It belonged to the missing traveler whose poster he'd seen nailed outside the general store. Before he could process it, the forest shifted again. The air warmed. The wind died. Then, a crack. A dry snap. Footfalls. Not from ahead. Not behind. From below, the roots began to move, slowly at first, like something waking from a long sleep. Then faster, they curled, tightened and lifted, like skeletal fingers breaking through loosened soil. Daniel backed away, but the forest no longer felt like a forest. It felt like a living trap. The whispers grew louder, rising into a panicked chorus of unseen souls. He turned to run, and stopped dead, because standing between the trees, partially hidden in the mist, was one of the Ozark Witches. Her silhouette was thin and crooked, like her bones had been stitched together wrong. Long, tangled gray hair fell over her face. Her dress looked woven from dried leaves and stitched animal skin. She didn't move, didn't breathe, she just stared, and when she finally lifted her head, Daniel saw her eyes, dead white, like she had no soul behind them. But somehow, they still saw him. Her lips parted slightly, revealing blackened teeth worn down to uneven points. Then she whispered, "You heard them." Daniel froze. The witch stepped forward, slow and deliberate, not walking but gliding. The roots responded to her movement, tightening, rising, turning toward him like hunting animals waiting for a signal. "You heard," she said again. Her voice was wrong, like two voices speaking at once. "That means the forest wants you." Daniel stumbled back until his spine hit a tree. The witch tilted her head, studying him with unsettling calm, then spoke with a twisted smile. "And once the forest chooses, you do not leave." Before she could take another step, Daniel grabbed a fallen branch and swung. Not at her. He knew it wouldn't work, but at the roots rising near his feet. They recoiled for a moment, just enough time for him to sprint deeper into the woods. But as he ran, the witch's whispers followed him, riding the wind like ghost voices. "Chosen. Do not run. You are already ours." The episode ends as Daniel trips over a mound of soil, and when he looks back, he realizes it isn't a mound. It's a grave. A fresh one. Still open, and it has his name carved on a wooden plank at the head. The next morning, after that horrific night where the forest itself felt alive, Joshua and Deputy Harlan slowly made their way toward the dirt road that led deeper into the Ozark Ridge. The same road where the traveling salesman Theodore Brigson was last seen before he vanished. The sun barely rose, just a dull, dying orange light pushing through the mist, as if even daylight didn't want to touch this cursed place. But the moment they stepped onto that road, they saw it. A symbol, drawn in dried blood directly across the packed dirt. A jagged spiral, surrounded by 3 stick figures with missing heads. Harlan froze. Joshua felt the hair behind his neck rise sharply. "This wasn't here last night," Harlan whispered, stepping backward, hand on his revolver. Joshua knelt down, touching the cracked, darkened blood with the tip of a twig, not wanting to make physical contact. "It's fresh," he said. 6 hours old, maybe less. Harlan turned white. 6 hours ago, we were fighting something in the Holt cabin." Joshua didn't answer. He already knew the truth. The witches weren't hiding from them. They were guiding them, laying down a trail, inviting them in. As they followed the blood spiral deeper, they found something else. 3 sets of footprints. Bare feet, small, female, but the spacing, the stride length, was wrong. Uneven. As if the bodies moving weren't shaped like normal humans. And then, Harlan grabbed Joshua's shoulder hard. In the middle of the trees, hanging from a crooked branch, a coat. The same brown traveling coat Theodore Brigson had been described wearing, except now it was soaked stiff with dried blood, and pinned to its lapel was something impossible. A lock of hair braided into a perfect ring. A man's hair, short, coarse. Joshua inspected it, fingers trembling. These braids, this is their mark. Their signature. Harlan swallowed. "You mean they collect hair from the men they kill?" Joshua shook his head slowly. "No, they collect it before they kill them, because the hair binds the spirit. A man can't cross over if a witch keeps part of him." Harlan felt his stomach twist. "So where's Brigson now?" Joshua looked toward the deeper woods, the branches bending unnaturally as though something heavy moved among them. "Alive," he whispered. "Or trapped somewhere between." A gust of icy wind blew through the trees, carrying a faint chorus of voices. Women humming in a slow, almost nursery rhyme rhythm. Harlan lifted his gun. Joshua stepped forward, because now they could finally hear it clearly. Someone was screaming for help, from underground. But the witches were watching them. From somewhere very, very close, the storm outside grew louder as Braden inched deeper into the collapsing cabin. The floorboards beneath him creaked like ribs straining under a final breath. Every instinct told him to turn back, but something colder, heavier, older than fear wrapped its fingers around him and urged him forward. A ragged rope hung from the ceiling, freshly cut, fibers too clean to belong in a rotting house. Below it, a faint draft of air rose up from the floor. Not just air, a smell. Damp soil. Copper. And something sweet and rotting. Like dying flowers left in a sealed box. Braden followed the scent and saw it. A trapdoor, barely visible under crusted dirt. Scratches carved into the wood. Dozens of them. Fingernail scratches. He swallowed hard and pulled it open. A staircase descended into absolute blackness. For a moment, the storm muffled, as if the world above closed its ears. The lantern flame flickered violently when he took the first step down, like it wanted to leap out of his hand and escape. Halfway into the darkness, he began hearing them. Whispers. You shouldn't have come alone. You carry the blood they want. Turn back, boy. Braden froze. The voices weren't human. They felt like breath exhaled straight into his bones. But something else cut through them, something physical. A clang, metal striking stone. And then another, and another. He lifted the lantern. The root cellar opened into a narrow tunnel, and at its end, faintly illuminated, chains. Dozens of them. Bolted into the stone walls, each holding a man-sized shackle. Some of them still held the bones of their victims. Others were stained dark with old rust. Or blood. Braden's throat tightened. The legends were true. The witches didn't just lure travelers, they kept them, he whispered to himself, barely able to breathe. Oh my God. But God wasn't down here. A sound vibrated through the stone floor, soft, rhythmic scraping. Something was moving deeper in the tunnel. Something large. Braden raised the lantern and saw a silhouette crawling out of the darkness. A man. No, what was left of one. Starved. Eyes wide with terror, skin torn from the wrists as though he'd ripped himself from the shackles by force. His voice cracked like broken glass. Run before they come. Before the three sisters smell you. But his warning came too late. All the lanterns hanging on the walls, long dead for decades, suddenly lit themselves one by one, igniting in a chain reaction of flame, illuminating the chamber in a blast of golden light. And Braden saw them, standing at the far end of the tunnel. 3 figures, tall. Bent, their faces hidden beneath tangled black veils soaked in dirt. Roots wrapped around their arms like veins. Eyes glowing faintly through the fabric. Too bright, too unnatural. The Ozark Witches. And all 3 whispered in perfect unison. Welcome home, Braden. The lantern shattered in his shaking hand. Darkness swallowed everything. The cellar door groaned as it lifted. Heavy, swollen with moisture, as if resisting being opened. Cold, earth-scented air spilled upward like the exhale of something that had been waiting, listening, surviving in the dark. Caleb hesitated at the top of the wooden steps. Behind him, the house was silent. Too silent. Even the cicadas outside had stopped singing. The last thing he expected down here was the sound of breathing. Not fast, not panicked, just slow, steady, rhythmic, like the measured breath of someone who'd been watching his shadows move through the house and was ready for him. He lowered his lantern. The flame trembled. So did his hand. As he descended into the root cellar, the wooden steps creaked under his boots. Halfway down, he paused, because he heard something he wished to God he hadn't. A man's voice. Weak. Strained. Please, don't let them take me again. Caleb froze. He scanned the cellar. The walls were lined with shelves of dried herbs, jars of strange animal parts suspended in oily liquid, and bundles of something that looked disturbingly like hair tied with red string. But the voice came from the far corner, behind a stack of burlap sacks. Caleb pulled them aside, and there he was. A man, ragged, starving, wrists torn raw from rope burns, half buried under old quilts as if he'd been hidden there like a secret shame. His eyes were swollen, but fear sharpened his voice when he saw Caleb. "Are you real?" the man whispered. "Or did they make you too?" Caleb knelt. "I'm real. What happened to you?" "What did the sisters do?" The man coughed. A wet sound, painful. "They take travelers. Men like us say they're collecting strength. They whisper things. Things that crawl into your head. Their voices don't sound human anymore." He squeezed Caleb's arm with surprising force. "You hear them yet? The whispers? They get louder the longer you stay." Caleb swallowed hard, because he had heard whispers, faint ones, ever since stepping onto the sisters' land. The man wasn't finished. They do something to the air, to the food, to the water. You start losing yourself. You start dreaming things. And then, he shuddered, then they take you down into the earth. Caleb's blood ran cold. "They buried men alive?" he asked. The man shook his head violently. "No. Worse. They grow something down there. Something that feeds on us. They call it the root-born." Caleb's lantern flickered. From somewhere beneath the floor, something scraped. Slowly. Patiently. As though it had felt the warmth of two living bodies and wanted to come closer. The man clutched Caleb's shirt. They hear us. They always hear us. You shouldn't have come here. Then. Footsteps upstairs. Soft. Deliberate. One of the witches. Maybe all three. Caleb looked up at the cellar ceiling as the footsteps moved across the kitchen floor, pausing directly above the cellar door. The latch clicked. The cellar door began to creak shut. Then, drifting down from above, a voice, sweet as honey but cold as grave dirt. Caleb, come back upstairs. We saved supper for you. The trapped man's fingernails dug into Caleb. Don't go. Don't ever go back up there. If you do, you won't be you anymore. Caleb stared at the stairs, at the closing door, at the darkness beneath his feet. He was trapped between the witches above and whatever the hell clawed in the soil below. And for the first time since he entered the house, he realized there might not be a way out for either of them. The sky above the Ozark Mountains churned with a sickly green tint, the kind that felt less like weather and more like a warning. By the time Isaac and Marlo stepped out of the ruined cabin, the forest had already changed, subtle at first, then unmistakable. The trees were closer, not just leaning, but shifted, as if the entire woods had crept inward while no one was looking. The air vibrated with a low hum like insects, but deeper, almost chanting. Marlo swallowed hard. Do you hear that? Isaac didn't answer. He was staring toward the tree line, where something pale flickered between the branches, moving too smoothly to be human, too tall to be an animal. They were no longer alone. The forest begins to hunt. The men hurried down the winding path, trying to retrace their steps, but the trail didn't match anything from earlier. Trees bent where they hadn't before. Moss grew thick where the ground used to be bare. The woods were rearranging themselves like a maze, alive, deliberate. Marlo whispered, They're doing this. The witches are controlling the woods. Isaac clenched his jaw. No. The woods are part of them. Another movement darted across their peripheral vision. A woman's silhouette. Bare feet, long hair tangled with leaves. Dress torn, old-fashioned. Face hidden. She was standing completely still, watching. Then, there was a second one behind her. Then a third. Their necks tilted in perfect, unnatural synchronicity, like marionettes reacting to an unseen puppeteer. Marlo stepped back. Oh God. Isaac, we need to run. A ritual older than the town itself. As they bolted deeper into the forest, whispers followed, multiple voices speaking in a tongue Isaac had only heard in the journal they found. The same chanting the witches used to mark travelers. The same curse that turned men into sacrifices. The whispers grew louder. The forest itself groaned, as though waking from a centuries-long sleep. Roots moved. Branches lowered. Shadows shifted deliberately. Isaac shouted, Keep running! Don't stop! They crashed into a clearing and froze. In the center stood a huge stone well, covered in claw marks and symbols carved so deep they looked burned into the rock. This wasn't just a well. This was an altar, the same one the journal described, the place where the Ozark Witches sent the marked men to the earth that feeds. Marlo stumbled back. We're in the center of the ritual grounds. A soft whisper hissed behind them. You came willingly. They spun. The three women were now at the edge of the clearing, closer than before. Their faces were pale and stretched, eyes too large, pupils too wide. Their smiles were jagged and wrong, like cracked porcelain struggling to imitate something human. Isaac trembled. What do you want from us? All three spoke at once, in a perfect, chilling harmony. To finish what we began in 1876, to take back what the forest was promised. The ground opens. The soil beneath their feet shuddered. Then it breathed. A sharp inhale that tightened the earth like lungs expanding. Marlo screamed as the ground cracked open, and skeletal hands shot upward. Men's hands, dozens of them, clawing at the air. Some were fresh. Some were bones. All were reaching blindly, desperately, as if begging to be released from an eternal nightmare. Isaac pulled Marlo back as bodies, half buried, half alive, struggled upward, their mouths open in silent agony. These were the missing travelers. The ones the witches fed to the earth. They weren't dead. They were trapped. Suffering. Held alive by the witch's curse. Marlo choked. This isn't human. This isn't possible. The witches stepped forward, their feet not touching the ground, their bodies swaying unnaturally. The forest remembers its offerings, they whispered. And you are already chosen. The escape attempt. In a burst of panic, Isaac grabbed Marlo and sprinted toward the opposite end of the clearing. The forest tried to block them. Vines whipped like lashes, branches clawed at their faces, thorns tore their clothes. But the men kept going, raw adrenaline powering every step. Behind them, the witches' voices rose in pitch, furious, echoing like a choir of banshees. The ground continued to crack open, sending tremors that nearly knocked Isaac off his feet. Roots erupted like tentacles, grabbing at their legs. Isaac slashed at them with a sharp stone, pulling Marlowe loose. "Don't stop," he yelled, even though both of them were terrified beyond anything they had ever felt. They burst through a final wall of branches, and suddenly the forest was silent. No whispers, no witches, no cracking ground, just the cold night air. They collapsed, gasping, bleeding, shaking, but alive. Somehow they had crossed an unseen boundary, one the witches couldn't step beyond. Marlowe looked back into the darkness of the trees. Why did they stop? Isaac stared, breath trembling. They didn't stop. They let us go. Marlowe's eyes widened. Why would they do that? The answer came slowly, horrifyingly. Isaac whispered, "Because we're still marked." The flames from the witch's cabin had died hours ago, but the Ozark forest hadn't grown quiet. It had grown too quiet. So quiet it felt like the woods were holding their breath, waiting for something to return. Thomas stood at the edge of the clearing, his clothes torn, hands trembling, smoke still clinging to his skin. Behind him, Eleanor and the others he had rescued leaned against trees, exhausted, half-conscious, but alive. The cabin, once the feeding ground for the 3 uncanny Ozark sisters, was now a pile of cracked, ember-glowing rubble. But Thomas knew the truth. Fire wasn't enough to kill what wasn't fully alive. And he was right. The final return. A gust of cold wind swept across the clearing, bending the trees as if something large moved between them. Eleanor jolted awake. "Thomas, they're not gone," she whispered. From the smoking ruins came a sound. A melodic hum, a tune that didn't belong to any human throat. A tune the kidnapped men had once described hearing before they vanished into the woods. A tune used to lure. The same song, soft, drifting, familiar. Impossible. Thomas's breath tightened. No. They burned. I saw it. They screamed, but the melody continued, weaving between the trees, growing richer, more layered, as if 3 voices were singing together. Thomas grabbed Eleanor's hand. "We're leaving, now." They gathered the survivors and staggered toward the dirt trail leading deeper into the forest. The only way out, but the forest shifted. The trail they had entered through hours ago was gone. Completely swallowed, replaced by thick brush and trees that hadn't been there before. Eleanor backed away, eyes wide. "They're changing the woods." The humming grew sharper, high, sweet notes slicing the air like needles. Then, crack. A tree split in half behind them, as if something massive had pushed through. Thomas didn't turn. He knew what he would see, and seeing it would freeze him long enough for the witches to take him. So he ran, dragging Eleanor, pushing the half-conscious men ahead of him. Breathing, cursing, praying. The witches' true form. They reached a ravine, a deep drop, jagged, impossible to cross. But behind them, the humming became laughter, slow, synchronized. 3 identical voices. 3 identical footsteps. 3 silhouettes emerging from the smoke. But they didn't look like women anymore. Not fully. Their bodies were long, twisted, wooden like roots. Their limbs moved like branches in wind. Their jaws hung open wider than human bones allowed. And their eyes, empty white, glowed with hunger and triumph. The Ozark witches were not witches at all. They were something older, something the forest itself had created. "Thomas!" Eleanor sobbed. "There's nowhere left to run." The creatures slithered closer, humming growing sharper, so sharp it made the men collapse, clutching their ears. Blood ran from one man's nose. Another began whispering nonsense. Eleanor dropped to her knees. Thomas grabbed a fallen log. It shook in his hands. He lifted it anyway. Come on! The center witch lunged. Her jaw unhinged so wide he could see into her hollow chest cavity. Thomas swung. The log splintered uselessly on her neck. She didn't even react. Instead, she leaned close, humming directly into his ear. And his vision warped. He saw flashes, men trapped, roots wrapping around them, bodies drained, souls emptied like fruit. The humming was a weapon, a spell, a lure. The final stand. Eleanor, shaking, spotted something. The iron cattle spike Thomas had used earlier to pry open the barn trap door. It glinted under ash. She crawled, grabbed it, and with every ounce of strength left, she stabbed the spike into the witch's throat. For the first time, the creature screamed. A raw, unnatural shriek that tore through the forest. The other 2 witches recoiled, their bodies twisting violently as the first one thrashed. Thomas pulled Eleanor up. "Iron. They can't stand iron." The witches screeched, backing away, their voices blending into a storm of agony. Thomas yanked the spike out and raised it again. "Stay behind me." The forest trembled. Birds erupted into the sky. The witches dissolved into a storm of leaves, ash, and black wind. Not dead, but forced back. Driven away. For now. Escape. And the truth. By dawn, Thomas, Eleanor, and the surviving men finally broke through the tree line. Civilization. Roads. Smoke from nearby farms. They collapsed where the woods ended. Bruised. Burned. Shaking. But alive, Eleanor whispered. "Is it over?" Thomas stared back at the forest. The trees were still, but deep inside he heard it. A faint, lingering harmony. The witches weren't gone. They were waiting. Waiting for more travelers, more strangers, more men who would wander into those ancient woods and never wander back out. And that is how the story of the Ozark Witches finally ended. Not with their destruction, but with their hunger merely delayed. The forest would feed again,